This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere Donald trumps every American president in history. He's the first to face criminal charges, lots of them. We'll head to the US for the latest. The stampede of businesses lining up for the government's Cyclone Relief Fund. The gap between applications and the money available is tens of millions of dollars. We talk to a business owner and a mayor. Rocking the boat, Auckland councillor Mike Lee gives ferry operators Fullers a serve. Oh, and he won't be voting for the mayor's cost-cutting budget either. And it's no April Fool's joke. Benefits and the minimum wage go up from tomorrow. You can watch us live on the RNZ website, Facebook and Freeview Channel 50.
RNZ News at 5. Good afternoon, I'm Marama Tipole. Donald Trump has become the first US president in history to be charged with a crime. He'll be indicted in New York over alleged hush money given to adult film star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 presidential election. CNN's Kara Scannell outlines what is likely to happen in a Manhattan courtroom early next week.
The Secret Service will get him here. There's underground tunnels. It's one way that they can move him in. They'll obviously want to secure the area. But the process, despite the extraordinary security measures and the historic moment, will be what any other person would experience. He will come in. He will be surrendered to the authorities. He will be fingerprinted. He'll have his mugshot taken. And then he will walk down a hallway likely. There's usually a row of cameras there, and then enter the courtroom. Sometimes defendants enter the courtroom wearing handcuffs. It's at the discretion of the DA's office. It remains to be seen what they will do here.
Mr. Trump, who's running again for president, says he's innocent. Mr. Trump's former Vice President, Mike Pence, calls it an outrage.
The message that this sends to the wider world is a terrible message about the American justice system. And I would that this Manhattan DA would have thought better of it and put the interest of the nation first.
Mr. Trump's lawyers say the key witness, his former fixer, Michael Cohen, is a convicted felon and a disbarred lawyer. But Mr. Cohen stands by evidence he gave to the grand jury.
We have an indictment today. So clearly, that means that the information provided was more than enough for the grand jury to come back with a determination for an indictment. Oh, by the way, for Donald, since we're talking about convicted felons, see you on Tuesday, pal.
Back home, the Chief Ombudsman has reopened his investigation into a complaint over former Minister Stuart Nash's emails. An email containing confidential cabinet information, which Mr Nash sent to two of his donors, was subject to an official information request by a journalist in 2021, but it was never released. Political reporter Giles Dexter has more.
Stuart Nash claimed the email was sent in his capacity as an MP, not a minister. The journalist complained to the Ombudsman, but the inquiry was discontinued last May. The complainant has now asked Peter Boshier to reopen it. The investigation will start by examining Mr Nash's response to Mr Boshier, including material provided by his office at the time. He will consider whether the information was held in his capacity as a minister, which is subject to the OIA, or as an MP, which is not, and whether there was a basis for withholding it.
The biggest nurses' union says it's unfair that nurses working in general practice are being left out of a pay boost for their community colleagues. The government's $200 million pay parity package for nurses in hospices and aged care is aimed at closing the pay gap with hospital nurses. However, the kai whakahaere for the nurses organisation, Kerry Nuku, says those in general practice are paid 10 to 15% less, with some Māori and Pasifika providers paying up to 30% less.
So we're at odds to try and understand why it's okay that the government can continue to pay different pockets of nurses different prices when they actually have to have the same skills, same work of equal value.
Kerry Nuku described it as a kick in the guts for nurses doing critical frontline work. A slip blocking one lane of State Highway 2 on the Remutaka Hill Road between Wellington and Wairarapa has been cleared. Workers had to clear the debris. Organisers of Auckland Symphony in the Domain have postponed tomorrow's event due to forecasted thunderstorms and heavy rain. The concert will now go ahead this Sunday, April the 2nd. And at least 35 people have been killed and 16 injured after the roof of a stepwell collapsed in central India. The incident occurred as devotees gathered at a temple in Indore to celebrate the Hindu festival of Ram Navami. It's 5:04. The Black Caps have scythed through the Sri Lankan batting line-up with the tourists 143 for 8 in the 37th over of the third and final one-day cricket international in Hamilton. Sri Lanka won the toss and decided to bat but soon slumped to 18 for 3 after 8 overs. Daryl Mitchell has 3 wickets while Matt Henry and Henry Shipley have 2 each. It's been over a decade since the Crusaders last lost to the Queensland Reds, but the defending champs aren't taking the hosts lightly. The two teams meet at Suncorp Stadium in Brisbane tonight, with the Reds not having beaten the 5th place Crusaders since the 2011 final, but coach Scott Robertson is preparing for a torrid encounter.
We've had some great battles over the years, and I think the results are off to respect of the week that's in front of you, and we understand their circumstance where they're at, and you know, it's never an easy game on Suncorp or in Brisbane anyway, so it'll be a hell of a match and full respect in our prep.
And also tonight, the winless Moana Pasifika hosts the Highlanders at Mount Smart. History beckons for reigning New Zealand Ironwoman Danielle McKenzie in Perth this weekend. McKenzie could become the first athlete to win both the New Zealand and Australian Ironwoman titles when the Australian Surf Lifesaving Championships conclude at Scarborough Beach.
Finals day is going to be hard. I think we go straight from a ski race final straight into the Ironwomen's. And as a ski paddler, if anyone knows, the forearm blowouts is insane. So to be able to turn around in 10 minutes and start an Ironwoman with a ski race is definitely going to be a challenge, but hey, I'm up for it, and just watch me from the front.
And that's the news.
Tomorrow morning, big tech wants a pause to the further development of artificial intelligence because of its profound risks. Brian Christian explains the alignment problem. Moko Depania on why he gave up the job he loved to become the first Māori mayor of the far north. And Professor Peter Frankopan on the epic story of climate change since the dawn of time. Ko Kim Hilaho, join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
This is RNZ National, on air, online and on demand. Lisa Owen and Checkpoint is next, but right now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. For Northland to Waikato, including Coromandel and Bay of Plenty, cloud gradually increasing today with isolated showers developing tomorrow morning, rain spreading eastwards tomorrow afternoon with isolated thunderstorms possible. For Gisborne, fine today, cloudy periods for tomorrow with isolated showers. Waitongo to Wellington, including the central high country, mainly fine for today and periods of rain for tomorrow, clearing for Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa by the evening. Nelson and Bulla to Fiordland, cloud increasing today, rain developing overnight, possibly heavy, turning to showers tomorrow morning, some heavy and possibly thundery for Bulla and Westland from the afternoon. For Marlborough and Canterbury, fine with high cloud, however a period of rain for tomorrow morning. For Otago and Southland, fine today, a period of rain for tomorrow morning, easing to a few showers, then becoming fine by evening. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers mainly for today. RNZ National, it's 5:07.
Nā mihi o eho, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai ki Checkpoint te tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Coming up, former US President Donald Trump makes history for all the wrong reasons. We'll have more on that shortly. But we begin tonight with the stampede for money from the government's Cyclone Business Recovery Fund. Checkpoint can reveal the $50 million relief package is massively oversubscribed in Hawke's Bay alone, leaving some worried they'll miss out on any financial support. The fund was doubled earlier this month and is for businesses severely disrupted by recent extreme weather events. 8 agencies from 7 affected areas, including Tairāwhiti, Hawke's Bay and Thames Coromandel, are responsible for approving applications and paying out the cash. In Hawke's Bay, that's the Chamber of Commerce. It's already received more than 1,600 applications for more than $41 million worth of funding. It only has about $19 million to distribute, barely half of what is needed. It's approved just over 500 grants, but won't say for exactly how much. Meanwhile, some locals are worried grants aren't getting to those who need it fast enough. Greg Miller from Valley Divine Restaurant in Esk Valley is one of them.
Well, we're still closed. Basically, I run a restaurant at Lyndon Estate Winery called Valley Divine Restaurant, and we've been closed since basically the beginning.
So zero business?
Yeah, zero business for 7 weeks almost, yeah.
And what does that mean for you?
It means that I'm still paying all my staff. At this stage, I've still got money. I've had a good few months leading into it, so I had a bit of a buffer. Still finding insurances. I haven't heard from my assessor for that, and I've also haven't heard back from the Chamber of Commerce who are dealing with the 40k grant from the government. Haven't seen the cent of that either, so I'm just running on my reserves.
So tell us about the grant. This is for the Cyclone Business Recovery Fund.
Yeah.
You've put in an application. Give us some details. How long ago, how much would you like from that, and what have you heard?
So we applied about, must be a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and we got a message on Monday saying there's 1,500 applicants, and they're trying to get through it, and they're trying to do the people that are worse off first. But then I also heard that they've got no funding left; it's gone. And I also know a business in Puketapu. He's been closed for the same time I have, and basically he applied on day one, and he hasn't received anything either.
So what's your worry here? That there's no money left, or there's just too many people and you won't get it?
There's that, but it's more the process, mate, because I know of a business that were only closed for a week and they got paid out. They got 40k from the government and they're back trading. There's no like, hey, look, you got a month to get your things in, we'll go through them and we'll give the money to who's needed it first off. It was just, whether it was just handed out willy-nilly, who knows? And, you know, being in charge of the chamber, being in charge of the money, it seems really weird when it's really an MP pay problem, you know. The ministry, you know, with work and income should have been dealing with that side of it, not Chamber of Commerce.
So how important is it to get a fast answer for your business?
Really important, because I'm sort of fighting the insurance company. I haven't heard from the assessors yet, so it's like, you know, when the funds run out, then basically what's going to happen is I'm going to have to tell my staff, sorry guys, can't afford to pay anymore.
And how many of them are there?
About 6.
And so what are they doing at the moment?
Helping me muck in and clean up at work. That's what they've all been doing, just at work mucking in. And so we're right in the heart of Eastdale, so we've got 6 feet of water through the whole brand new cellar door and barrel room, and the restaurant's high and dry. It's all good. Like we just spent like 6 weeks just cleaning.
Yeah, so you are not able to open at the moment because of the condition of the business?
Yeah, correct.
I understand you do weddings.
Yes, we do, yeah.
And so, wow, this would be, peak wedding season right now?
Yes, it was. I managed to find a venue to do one of the weddings I had booked. The rest, a couple of the weddings have actually postponed. But it's more my next year. Like, I've got brides next year wanting to cancel. So we're talking, you know, I've got about 20 to 30 weddings next season. And basically, yeah, I've got over half of those now querying whether they want to get married here or not.
Greg, is that because they can't be certain whether you're going to be open or not?
I just think it's brides freaking out. I've got one bride who's getting married in May no matter what, and she doesn't care to state what it looks like. She's obviously not a pretentious bride, and basically she's going to get married out here no matter what. It doesn't matter what it looks like.
What would it mean for you to get money from this fund? How important is it to you, and what would it be for?
Well, it would be important for me at this stage because, as I say, my staff are like my family. And in hospital, as you know, if you lose your staff, you can't really reopen because you're not going to find staff again. Because it's like a big family. My chef's been with me for 5 years. I'm a chef as well, so, you know, he's been here 5 years with me. And most of my staff have been here for a while, and I pay them really well too. They get paid probably more than most places elsewhere around just because you've got to keep your staff. So first and foremost, if we keep the staff going, then perhaps I can get some bigger machinery in here to get front lawn tidied up and get reseeded. I'll use that money to get the place looking spicko in a hurry instead of just trying to hold my money so I can pay my staff each week.
Are you paying yourself, Greg, right now?
I pay myself once because I had to pay some bills. Right.
So you've not got an income at all, really?
No.
How stressed are you about the whole situation?
I'm pretty stressed out. I've put 10 years into this place, you know, and we just started a pump, and now we went through COVID, and this is way worse than COVID.
So this money, the fund for businesses to get back on their feet, it is supposed to help with immediate pressure, cash flow pressure for businesses. And we know from the Hawke's Bay Chamber that the number of applications far exceeds the amount of money they have to give out. What are your thoughts on that?
I knew it would always be the case, because as soon as I read how the applications worked, I knew that everyone in Hawke's Bay can apply for it, knowing that if your business was affected from the cyclone, you can apply for it. So there was no really agenda for the money, if you know what I mean. I know people across the road, they're being paid out, I think they got paid out 20 grand, and he was back working within 2 weeks.
So does there need to be some more money in the pot, Greg?
A lot more money in the pot. This government's borrowed enough now, so a little bit more is not happening. I heard that there's about $40 million of the claims in Hawke's Bay alone.
So it leaves a lot of people missing out.
Yeah, lots of people are missing out, and there's been no real who gets paid out first.
So you haven't been told the details of the criteria for how they're choosing who to pay?
Oh, they said they were going to pay the hardest affected first. That was an email I received the other day, just this week. I went, okay, well, why are these people that got paid out back at work then? And we haven't got paid.
And that's Greg Miller there. The Hawke's Bay Chamber of Commerce declined our request for an interview, but did tell Checkpoint demand has well exceeded available funding, and it is having to prioritise the hardest hit businesses. Joining us now is the Wairoa Mayor, Craig Little. Kia ora, Craig. You're in that Hawke's Bay catchment. $40 million worth of applications, only $19 million to give out. Where does that leave you?
Not in a good place, and like Greg probably nailed it, really. I can't speak on the rest of Hawke's Bay, but I know from a Waira point of view, they're all facing the same challenges as Greg, and it's keeping those, there's valued staff members that you don't want to go anywhere else, and to clean up while you're cleaning up, you're not making any money, and we need to act fast. And look, from our point of view, someone making decisions for us down in Hawke's Bay is probably not ideal, and we need to make them up here. We've started the Mayor Relief Fund. It's not a huge fund, but we've done 25 applicants in our first round on Wednesday, and we're going back and again Monday and meet as often as we need it to do it. And we're going to burn that pretty quick. We need more money, but these businesses need that money now because they are just absolutely struggling, and they're just burning all the reserves they've got and borrowing. So the Hawke's Bay Chamber of Commerce has got the $19 million to hand up. You don't think they're the right people to be making decisions for Wairoa? Oh, definitely not. Yep, no, definitely not. We've got the business associations actually had started up, but we've got another organisation called Waira Young and Achievers Trust that they've been doing applications for all the funding that's available for everybody. Because I've met people down the street just bewildered. They don't know what to do, and there's a lot of people that will sit back and what they call whakamā, where they don't want to be embarrassed about claiming. We need to chase those people up. They may need it more. You need to really target the ones that need it, and that's pretty easy to do if you're yellow stickered or red stickered. Get those first, and we've just got to target these people better than we are, because Waira going up against the whole of Hawke's Bay is not going to help us at all. I see from the statistics that have been released by the Hawke's Bay Chamber of Commerce, of the 1,600 odd applications they've got, 4% of them are from the Wairoa district. Do you think as many people who could be are taking advantage of this fund and have actually put applications in? No, I wouldn't think so, because it's quite difficult to do it. They don't know what to do. Don't forget, a lot of these people are out of their homes, out of their businesses. They haven't got time to sit down on a computer. They're dealing with insurance companies. They're dealing with trying to get built gone. This has got to be an organisation that actually makes it work. Go to the people, work out the businesses that need it, and actually help them with the application. When you say go to the people, what do you mean? Set up camp in Wairoa, have an open day, come and fill a form out? Yep, set up camp, or if you can't set up camp, give it to us and we'll... we've done that already with a few things, and, we just can't wait. And like talking to Greg, what he's just saying before on the radio is just, he's nailed it, and that's what our businesses are feeling like in Waira as well. Applications for this fund close at 4:30 on Monday. Gosh, that's a lot of time, isn't it? And so what happens after that, if and this is, with the mayoral fund, I've made it quite clear, and like I say, the mayoral fund's is nothing compared to this. Don't think just because you're first in it's going to be best dressed. This has got to be fairness for everybody, and obviously this is closing on Monday. What did you say? We've got 4% from Wairoa. Yeah, 4% of the applications are from Wairoa. And just don't forget, we were hit pretty badly. Some places of Hastings were hit pretty badly. I'd love to see what other businesses are applying for it and getting it. Are they eligible? We've just got to get this right.
So they have half of what they need in terms of the applications of 41 million's worth plus, and they've got 19 million to hand out. How much more do you think needs to be kicked into the pot?
Look, I can't speak. Look, I can't even get to Hawke's Bay to even have a look, and that's why it's a bit of a joke that we've got to apply for down in Hawke's Bay. But I think a hell of a lot more. Look, it's well intentioned. There's no doubt about it. But it's not been administrated like it should be, and we've just got to get it right. And you know, I keep banging on. That's why localism is so good, because central government can't do a lot of things that local people can do, and local organisation.
Craig, how is the clean-up generally going? How are you managing there in Wairoa? Are you getting what you need beyond this?
Oh, we're not. No, we're funding it all ourselves at the moment. The government did come out with the the rubbish and that to pay for that. We still need to be paid for the silt. We're actually doing it from a Wairau District Council point of view. Hawke's Bay Regional Council need to get up here. I see they're promising and to help people with silt removal down in Hawke's Bay. We're not getting that up here. We're footing the bill ourselves. We're only a little council. We're a very small rate base. And I'm really worried for our ratepayers in the future, how we're going to afford all this. But you can't forget about people, and that's what we haven't done, because these people are still out of their homes. It's a marathon. There's miles. We can't, nowhere near there yet. They're still trying to dry out their homes, and we're still trying to get the silt out from under their houses. It's just scary. Insurance companies, you know, we had to talk to all the companies the other day. We've got to make it quicker. People have been on the phone for 4 hours whilst they're trying to do all their cleaning up their homes, whilst they're trying to work, you know, all the things they do, and we just got to make it quicker. We've had experience, you know, Christchurch, they should know by now.
Do you think some parts of the country think that life is back to normal for you guys?
Oh, definitely. Gosh, yeah. Some parts of, I could dare say it, of Wairoa are living quite normal. When you know, 200 or 300 people, or 200 or 300 homes are really struggling, and people, you know, I don't think they really get the severity of Wairoa, and I've got to say Esdale, Puketap, Pakawai, and there's one other. You know, they're just, yeah, these people are really struggling, and we've got to get ahead of this. Winter's coming.
Really appreciate your time, Craig. Thank you for joining us. That is the Wairoa Mayor there, Craig Little. Now, the Cyclone Recovery Minister declined to be interviewed about the fund on Checkpoint, but in a statement he says the government will continue to monitor the demand for this support, and applications are still being processed in all regions. It is 21 after 5. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. What I'd like to know is if you have applied for one of these grants, a business recovery grant in essence, in your area, let us know what you've applied for, what the response has been, what do you make of the fund so far, is it working from your point of view? Text us on 2101, you can tweet us at checkpointrnz, or the email address checkpoints@rnz.co.nz. Time to head to the headlines. Ko marama anō tēnei.
Thank you, Lisa. Checkpoints revealed the government's $50 million Cyclone Business Recovery Fund is massively oversubscribed in Hawke's Bay alone. Hawke's Bay Chamber of Commerce has about $19 million to give out, but it's had more than 1,600 applications, totalling over $41 million. Wairoa Mayor Craig Little told Checkpoint help needed to be administered locally as businesses were struggling and burning through reserves. Donald Trump is facing a court appearance early next week, the first US president to be charged with a crime. A Manhattan grand jury has indicted him over alleged hush money paid to an adult film actress. Mr. Trump says he's innocent. Back home, Prime Minister Chris Hipkins says 2 senior staff in his office made a mistake when they failed to flag the email, which has now ended Stuart Nash's ministerial career. Mr. Nash was sacked from Cabinet after the email sent to donors in 2020 about confidential Cabinet discussions was uncovered in the media this week. The Prime Minister's office staffers had known about it since 2021. The owners of the Christchurch Adventure Park will have to pay millions of dollars to people whose homes were damaged in the 2017 Port Hills fire. The park has lost its appeal to overturn a previous decision in a lawsuit launched by dozens of homeowners. And Finland's membership of NATO has been ratified by all of the military alliance's member states. The last step came late today in Ankara, where the Turkish parliament approved Finland's application. It's 23 minutes past 5.
Thank you, Marama. He's nailed his brand as one of a kind. Donald Trump's made history as the first of 46 presidents to be criminally charged. A grand jury voted to indict the ex-president and reality TV star on criminal charges after a probe into hush money paid to porn star Stormy Daniels. Mr. Trump is likely to be arrested in the coming days, which will involve fingerprints and a mugshot. This as he makes another bid for the White House. World Watch's Polina Lau has more.
Criminally investigating a candidate, bad publicity and all.
An historic day for Donald Trump, but for all the wrong reasons. A grand jury in New York has voted to indict him after investigating a $130,000 payout to adult film star Stormy Daniels before the 2016 election in an attempt to silence her over an alleged affair. Exact charges are not yet known, but it's believed they include 30 counts related to business fraud. Mr. Trump denies any wrongdoing, calling it political persecution. The Chicago Sun-Times Washington bureau chief, Lynn Sweet, says this is significant.
He's also the first former president criminally indicted who's twice impeached, who is the front runner for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination.
The investigation stemmed from an allegation that Mr. Trump directed his then lawyer, Michael Cohen, to pay Stormy Daniels. It's not illegal to pay someone hush money, but because it was paid 1 month before the election, Mr. Trump's critics argue it could amount to campaign violation. In 2018, Mr. Cohen pleaded guilty to tax evasion and breaking campaign finance rules, in part related to Ms. Daniels' payment. Mr. Cohen, who served prison time and testified before this grand jury, has this response.
This is a long time coming. This has not been like what they did to me, what the Southern District did. They gave me 48 hours to plead guilty. They were filing an 80-page indictment. This is 5 years to hold this man accountable. Now, I do have to acknowledge that during that time period, he still was President of the United States.
Politicians are unsurprisingly divided. Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is accusing Manhattan District Attorney Alan Bragg of weaponizing the justice system against Donald Trump, while Democrats have welcomed the charges, saying no one is above the law. Former Congressman Joe Walsh says this indictment will help boost Donald Trump among Republicans.
It will strengthen Trump among Republicans because Donald Trump will do what he's always done, which is say, look at me, I'm a victim. They're after me. Everybody's after me. And that resonates with his base, with Republican voters.
Attorney and former trade advisor to Presidents Bill Clinton and George Bush, Steve Gill, says Mr. Trump will take advantage of this.
I think you will see President Trump play to the cameras. And the Democrats, the liberals, are wanting the headline, Trump indicted. They've got their win. That's all they wanted. And they'll get the mugshot that they want. And that will be the last win they get, I think, in this case. And keep in mind that corporations, individuals, settle cases all the time to avoid embarrassment, to avoid legal fees.
There is nothing in US law that stops a candidate who is found guilty of a crime from technically campaigning for and serving as president, even while in prison. The former president has been urging his supporters to rise up, suggesting there would be violence and disruption if he is charged. Here he was last weekend.
Legal scholars can't believe what they're witnessing. They've got nothing. They've got nothing. Think of it. 11 million pages. And my tax returns on top of it, and they're a big return. It probably makes me the most innocent man in the history of our country. Friends of mine say that.
Like all defendants in criminal cases, Mr. Trump faces having his fingerprints recorded and his mugshot taken. He's likely to be arraigned next week, but on the political side, analyst Calvin Dark says a lot will happen between now and next week.
We're going to see Trump continue his intimidation campaign that he started. You know, he had the rally in Waco, Texas this past weekend, where he was constantly escalating the rhetoric against the Manhattan DA, Alvin Bragg, and encouraging his supporters to protest and, you know, using phrases like death and destruction. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that.
The New York Police Department is ramping up security in anticipation for any protests and has been told to be ready for mobilization at any time. Mr. Trump, who's living in Florida, is expected to travel to New York for his formal arrest and his first court hearing.
Polina Lau reporting. The Black Caps in Sri Lanka are playing the third and final one-dayer in Hamilton, and there is plenty on the line for the visitors. This series is the last in the World Cup cycle for both teams. New Zealand has already secured direct qualification for the tournament in India later this year, whereas Sri Lanka must win today to have any chance of becoming the last nation to claim a direct qualification spot. Now, we're joined by sports reporter Felicity Reid. Catch us up on what point the game is at, please.
Well, Sri Lanka won the toss and opted to bat, which may be a decision they quickly regretted, as they lost 3 wickets in the first 8 overs. That was 2 wickets for Matt Henry and 1 for Henry Shipley in that time. Then they were 6 down for 100 and then all out for 157 in the 42nd over. So that's a little bit better than what they did in that first ODI. They were all out for 76, and then the second ODI was washed out. So a little bit of an improvement, but shouldn't be too hard for the Black Caps to chase that down. They are at Seddon Park, which is a ground which is...
Oh, don't jinx them, Felicity.
Okay.
But anyway, carry on.
But it is a ground that has turned out some good results for the Black Caps and some memorable occasions and memorable wins for the players and for the Black Caps in general. But so... in those wicket takers as well, it was Matt Henry with 3, Daryl Mitchell and Henry Shipley also with 3. So at least the bowlers have turned up. Hopefully the batters do the same.
OK. Sunday's broadcast of the first T20 between these two teams will make history. Why is that?
Yes, it will. It's going to be the first bilingual commentary of an international cricket game in New Zealand. So it's going to be 3 former New Zealand cricketers, Maya Lewis, Peter McGlashan and Rebecca Rolls, who join the commentary team. So that'll be English and Te Reo Māori. And you can pick that up if you're watching it on Spark or TVNZ with the alternative commentary button. So if you select that, you'll be able to listen to that. And so as much as for cricket, this is quite a big occasion for them, and it's a community that often cricket is said to have overlooked. So it's a good opportunity sort of to engage a different audience. But I have to say, in terms of cricket, it's a bit of a latecomer to this. Rugby was doing it in 2011 on Māori TV. And also during the 2019, Sky picked that up and went for some of the All Blacks and Black Ferns games, as well as they've also tried Samoan, Tongan and Fijian when New Zealand have played those teams as well. Step in the right direction for cricket as well.
But they're 5 years to a decade behind everybody else.
A little bit, yes.
Yeah. Thanks, Felicity. That is our sports reporter, Felicity Reid there. From tomorrow, more than 8,000 nurses working in aged care, hospices and other community providers will start getting pay rises of up to 15%. That's going to bring them closer to pay parity with their colleagues in hospitals. But family doctors warn that leaving out nurses in general practice means they'll continue to hemorrhage staff. Ruth Hill reports.
Te Omanga hospice nurse Laura Page says it's a privilege to work where she does and help people live their best lives right until the end. She says this pay rise makes hospice nurses finally feel they're being cared for as well.
For a lot of it's a predominantly female workforce. It means we can support our families better, which means that we can be better people and do our job better. And look after our people better.
Her colleague, Caroline Komini, says hospices generally don't have the high turnover of aged care and other community organisations.
What holds them here? I think it's more about the work rather than the pay. Certainly for me, it's that case.
She hopes getting paid similar rates to hospital services will make it possible for more nurses to do this important mahi. Health Minister Aisha Verrill, who was at Te Omanga in Lower Hutt today to mark the occasion, says the $200 million boost will take most nurses' base salary to about 95% of their hospital-based colleagues' pay.
One of the reasons why the gap emerged was because the government had done so much to raise hospital nurse salaries through the collective settlement in 2021 and the recent pay equity interim payments that went out.
Dr Verrill says it's also good news for community health services, which have been losing nurses to hospitals.
While when I visit hospices, they seem to be very special places that retain their staff for long periods of time, I know in aged residential care, concern about salaries has been a reason why it's been difficult to keep some aged residential care beds open. So I see this as not just important in terms of the recognition of those workers, but also for the sustainability of our health system and addressing some of the problems we have with discharging people from hospital out to the community.
It's been a hard-won fight, with many primary care nurses going on strike in October after more than a year of failed pay negotiations. And the battle is not over for some, with nurses working in GP clinics left out in the cold. The nurses' organisation Kai Whakahaere, Kiri Nuku, says the difference between hospital pay rates and general practice is about 10 to 15%, with some Māori and Pacifica services languishing 25 to 30% below.
It's a real kick in the guts for the work that they're doing. So for many, it has been the last straw and they're looking to go overseas. But if we want to invest in a workforce, then we need to sincerely listen to what they're wanting.
Dr. Verrill says the government has recently announced a pathway for consideration of pay parity in general practice. However, GP Owners Association Chair Dr. Tim Malloy says the so-called pathway looks like procrastination on the government's part. He says the sector has been providing evidence to Te Whatu Ora for months now, and the evidence of the pay gap is there in black and white in the employment agreements for general practice and hospital nurses.
Our biggest worry is that while we delay through process, we are still losing workforce. And we're reaching a critical point where patients will get hurt. And as a doctor, I find that unacceptable.
Meanwhile, nurses working for Plunkett, family planning, school nursing services, mental health and addiction, rural hospitals and in telehealth will have to wait until the 1st of July for their pay rise.
That report from Ruth Hill, and it is 25 minutes to 6. Kia amo tonu mai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It's time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai anei, ko Nona Peltier. Nona's in the studio to talk business. Let's start with the consumer sentiment. It'll be another survey, won't it, Nona? It's hit its lowest level since December. Okay, what's the latest?
This is interesting. So we've been having these surveys for a while, as you know. This one is from the ANZ Roy Morgan Consumer Confidence Survey. It shows there was a 2-point drop to 77.7 points, 100 being sort of positive, anything lower, negative. Okay, well, the number of people who think it's a good time to buy a major appliance is a very low, negative 32%. That's low. Interestingly, though, the number of people who think inflation is going to continue to increase, it rose to, the expectation is 5.2%. That's what they think inflation will be. And that's the highest read in 9 months. So that's going to be a concern for the Reserve Bank, because the Reserve Bank wants to see expectations begin to fall, that people start to think that inflation will come down. Well, that's not happened yet. So does that mean that the Reserve Bank will continue to raise interest rates? Probably.
Okay, watch this space. Let's talk about the clothing retailer Hallstein Glasson. It's reported a strong first half net profit. Do we know why and what did it make?
Interesting. Okay, so their first half was up 75% to nearly $21 million, and they had revenue growth of also 31%. Still, their gross profit margin was down a bit. It was under pressure because of increased costs of imports, which we know, of course, we've seen that when we go shopping, and higher than normal freight costs. Still, they managed to make quite a good profit. Sales were up on both sides of the Tasman. They have, so Hallstein Glasson has women's clothing, men's clothing. Yep. Sales were up both sides. And it says the start to the second half is still very challenging, but already the first 8 weeks of this financial year, this second half of this financial year, are up 14%. So people are still spending their money. And that's the funny bit, isn't it? Like people are worried about stuff, but they're still going out and doing the spending.
Conflicting messages, I think is what you're saying.
That's what we're saying, yeah.
Okay, what else has been happening on the markets?
Okay, so yesterday we had a very strong uplift in the NZX Top 50. Yes. Now, today we had a downdraft, 0.4% down. That's a 49-point drop to 11,885. And that's funny because in Asia, the markets were looking a lot better. Not so much here in New Zealand, but it could have been like a correction after yesterday. The New Zealand dollar is doing much better today, a higher rate, and that's because the US dollar is, taking a bit of a drop down. So we're trading at 62.9 US cents, 93.6 Australian, and 50.7 British pounds. So stronger lift in the currency, a bit weaker in the markets. Overall, it's been quite the week.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. That's Nona Paltrow with Business News. It is 22 minutes to 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. We're going to get to some of your feedback now. Some of you getting in touch about the Cyclone recovery grants. This is for businesses. Emma says, I know for a fact the Chamber here in Hawke's Bay are only meeting twice a week to go through applications. It's a disaster. They should be meeting daily at this stage. And don't get me started on insurance. No sense of urgency from anyone, says Emma. Karen says there is more than $10 million sitting in the Red Cross account. Who is policing that redistribution? Yeah, I'd be interested to know where that money is going, and maybe we can check that out for you. This one on insurance. What about the income protection insurance, business interruption insurance? I used to have a business a few years ago. Is the government paying for the insurance companies, or are these businesses have no insurance? That listener is asking. And an email in too saying, I'm so embarrassed and sincerely sympathetic at the slow process of reaching out to Wairoa and regional communities in East Coast towns. I can feel the bitterness and sheer frustration of Mayor Craig Little, and we spoke to him a little earlier in the program about the grant process. So do keep your feedback coming. Homai o whakaaro. Let us know your thoughts on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. The email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Time to go to the headlines now. Anei Amarama, mina pita pita kōrero.
Thank you, Lisa. Donald Trump is declaring his innocence, calling an indictment over alleged hush money paid to an adult film star political persecution. Mr. Trump has become the first US president to face criminal charges. Senior Republicans are rallying behind him. Back home, the Chief Ombudsman has reopened his investigation into a complaint over former Minister Stuart Nash's emails. An email containing confidential cabinet information, which Mr. Nash sent to two of his donors, was subject to a journalist's official information request in 2021, but it was never released. The National Party says progress on expanding New Zealand's wind and solar farms is too slow. The party today announced its Electrify NZ policy, which would force building consents on renewable energy farms to be approved within 1 year. National's infrastructure spokesperson Chris Bishop says the country's zero emissions goal is hampered by red tape. The National Emergency Management Agency will be paid $40,000 after court action over the Whakaari White Island eruption was dropped. The agency had faced a charge of breaching the Health and Safety at Work Act, but a judge dismissed the charge last year, leaving the agency facing significant costs, which WorkSafe will now cover. And the government has announced another tranche of sanctions targeting 27 political and military figures from Russia and Belarus as part of its ongoing response to the war in Ukraine. The sanctions include bans on travel and dealing assets or services. We'll have more news at 6.
Kia ora rā e ho. Desperate renters in Queenstown are asking real estate agents if they can stay in empty houses on the market. Queenstown Lakes District Council has called for government help, citing a housing crisis in the resort town. It's being fuelled by low rent stock, high rent prices, and landlords choosing to Airbnb their homes over long-term rental agreements. Kelly Anderson, the owner of Tall Poppy Real Estate Agency, joins us now. Kia ora, Kelly. What sort of demand is there to camp out in for-sale homes?
Definitely increasing demand is the answer. Yeah, I am getting calls on a very regular basis from people either wanting to know if we know of any rentals that are going to be coming to market, if we've sold any houses that have been purchased by investors, or most recently it has been whether they can actually live in the vacant houses while they're on the market.
And is anyone agreeing to that? Is anyone keen to put tenants in when they've got their house on the market?
Unfortunately, no, it hasn't been very popular. We do ask people that, but in general, the owners that are selling with vacant possession are doing it so that they get the better advantages when it comes to negotiating with buyers, because it's more difficult to sell if you have got tenants in place.
So, OK, these people are running out of options, and about 25%, I think it is, of the housing stock down there in Queenstown is empty. Why is it empty? Why are there so many empty houses?
It's just a combination of things, really. A lot of them are holiday homes, And I guess people are just reluctant to put tenants in, and then they can't use the houses themselves as they want to. And we're just seeing a lot of those rentals come to market now. It's just to do with the interest deductibility, rising interest rates, and there's a lot that are baby boomers that are sort of hitting retirement, and those investment properties were originally purchased as a nest egg that they now want to free up.
How desperate are these people ringing you?
Well, they're really desperate if they're getting to the stage that they've explored all other options and they have hit brick walls. That they're telling me that they do everything from, publicly advertising that they're after a house on all of the social media channels. You see it in the local papers. They've already registered with every single property manager. They're approaching all of the private property rentals that are listed, and they're getting nowhere. So they're looking further afield, and they're getting creative in their search for housing.
What do you know about companies buying houses to actually accommodate their workers? Is that something that's happening or you're getting inquiries about?
Yes, it is. It's been happening in Queenstown for a while. It's been a small corner of the market, but it's increasing, and it's now spreading out to other areas because the crisis in Queenstown is happening all through the whole district. So I work a lot in Central Otago and Cromwell especially. We've been noticing it over there, and we've never had that before in that market, but we're definitely getting it now. Companies purchasing and inquiring at a rate that I've never seen before.
Yeah, and how far out of town would they have to buy a place to make it, a good investment to put their workers in it? Because you're not a cheap district, to be honest, are you, Keely?
No, we're not. But they're looking right through Central and beyond. So a 45-minute to an hour drive away for a commute now seems to be pretty reasonable for people to accept that as a travel distance.
Hey, I know you're in sales, but can you give us an idea? I mean, what do you pay for a rental property in Queenstown? If you're lucky enough to stumble across a four-beddy house that someone wants to rent out, I mean, what kind of price are we talking about?
It always varies. It depends on the standard of the house and the age of it. If you're looking for something that's maybe older, it could be a little bit dated, then you're generally sort of paying around that sort of $800 to $900 a week, and it can go up from there. If you could find anything cheaper than that, or if you've already got something that's cheaper than that, then you'd be wanting to hold on to it.
Keely, I don't want to wish this on you, but have squatters become a problem yet down there?
No, not that I'm aware of, and I really hope that doesn't get to that stage. That would be something that would be really concerning. So hopefully not.
Really appreciate your time, Kelly. Thanks for joining us. That's Kelly Anderson, who's the owner of Tall Poppy Real Estate Agency down in Queenstown. If you are in the area and you're looking for accommodation, let us know what the hunt is like. We're curious to know how hard it is to find a property. What are the prices? What's the quality? You can text us on 2101 or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. It is 14 minutes away from 6. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. Benefits, subsidies and wages are all set for a shake-up as a new financial year kicks off tomorrow. Young families, seniors and students are among those who will see more in their pockets, while the minimum wage rises by another $1.50. Reporter Tom Taylor and camera operator Nick Monroe have the story.
A deep, cold river. We can't go over it. We can't go. We've got to go through it.
Can't go under it, can't go around it. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins saying the government's going through with its raft of cost of living support measures being introduced tomorrow. He started the day reading picture books to the kids of Papakura's Happy Turtle Childcare Centre. For their parents, a different kind of information to take in.
Significantly increasing the childcare subsidy availability so that more families can benefit from that, because we know that will make a big difference.
The government says after tomorrow's changes, more than half of New Zealand families with kids should be eligible for subsidised childcare, with 10,000 more children covered. It's also boosting the eldest child rate of the family tax credit and best start payments that help parents with costs of a newborn. Families on a benefit with children will receive an extra $41 a week, with sole parents getting an extra $32. For these parents, it's a big deal.
I know at one stage I had 2 children under 5 at daycare, so it was a lot of money. It was something like $640 a fortnight, which is a massive amount of money to be sort of taking out. Any sort of support for families, I think at this time is really important. There's a lot of hurting families out there.
People with like many young children, they need to afford. It's really hard to afford these days. So it's a very good initiative, I feel.
At the PM's next stop, the Manarewa RSA, he spoke to seniors and veterans who get a boost to their superannuation. From tomorrow, a couple over the age of 65 receives more than $100 extra a fortnight, while a single person gets $67. President of the Royal New Zealand RSA, Sir Buck Shelford, says many older Kiwis are in dire need of this assistance.
So it's pretty tough times for a lot of people. Interest rates keep going up. They're thinking it might be going up again soon. So for people with big mortgages, and I got big mortgages, so, we've got to find the cash to pay the bills.
RSA member Jeff Dixon says the money will come in handy.
Any help, particularly to the elderly people, and I'm a young buck, I suppose, but to the elderly people who are finding it difficult, those with large families, anything is of a help, and I'm grateful.
New Zealand's lowest earners are also set to get a boost, with the minimum wage increasing by $1.50 to $22.70 an hour. Not everyone's happy with the news, with Business NZ calling the 6% increase a slap in the face for struggling businesses. The Prime Minister acknowledges these concerns, but says they're a necessary challenge to overcome.
For the small business community in particular, the minimum wage can put an extra cost on them and extra pressure on them. But in my conversations with small business owners, they also want to make sure that they're doing the right thing by their staff as well. They also want their staff to benefit from their hard work too.
Under the current Labour government, the minimum wage has been reviewed every year. A $20 boost to the student allowance and student loan living cost payments also comes into effect tomorrow.
And that report's from Tom Taylor. If you want to look at the video version filmed by Nick Monroe, it'll be on our webpage. A new blood test could spare thousands of bowel cancer patients from having to go through unnecessary chemotherapy. Many patients that have stage 3 cancer, now that's cancer which has spread to the lymph nodes, can only be cured by surgery. But until now, doctors haven't been able to know for sure which patients will respond to treatment. The BBC's Fergus Walsh has more.
The C word is a big word to live with.
It's a year since Ben Cook was diagnosed with bowel cancer.
I haven't taken a single day off work, which has been incredible.
After successful surgery, patients like Ben are usually offered intravenous chemotherapy to mop up any cancer cells that might be remaining. But a new type of blood test showed he was cancer-free.
Right, what should we do? A big, enormous Chelsea blow dryer?
So Ben, who runs this hair salon in Chelsea, was spared the toxic side effects, which can include nerve damage to the hands and feet.
Work for me is my therapy as such. I love going to work. I love my job. I'm very lucky to do what I do. And if I'd have had the intravenous, I feel like I wouldn't have been able to have carried on. But the fact that I didn't have any tingling or anything in my hands has just been an absolute blessing.
Take a deep breath in, sharp scratch.
So how can a blood test tell if a patient like Ben is free of cancer? It looks for tiny fragments of tumour DNA circulating in the bloodstream. If there's none present, there's a low risk the cancer will return. These blood tests, or liquid biopsies, are part of a revolution in the diagnosis and monitoring of cancer. They're being trialled in the UK across lung, breast, as well as bowel cancer, and can detect minute fragments of tumour DNA months, even years before they'd show up on a scan. Ben has regular checkups at the Royal Marsden, which is leading a trial of the blood test across dozens of hospitals.
Your cancer was diagnosed in the cecum, in the right colon.
The results could transform the way thousands of bowel cancer patients are treated in the UK every year.
I hope through this trial that we generate the evidence to show that this technology, liquid biopsies, can be used to spare patients with stage 3 bowel cancer unnecessary chemotherapy after their bowel cancer surgery, because they don't need it.
Artist Suzanne Winter had the blood test done privately and was also spared chemotherapy following her bowel cancer surgery.
I just feel incredibly lucky. I know how toxic it is. I know that I would feel terrible, and also your whole everything is you're getting ready for it. You're psyching yourself up for it. So to suddenly hear that you aren't going to need it is just unbelievable.
Chemotherapy still has a vital role in treating cancer, but if blood test trials are successful, it will mean a brighter future for thousands of patients every year, as well as saving the NHS money.
Hundreds of people gathered out Aotearoa in South Taranaki today to witness the initialling of Te Ruruku Putakirongo, the Treaty of Waitangi settlement for Taranaki Maunga. The deal consigns the name of Egmont to the history books, and the National Park's peaks, regarded as tupuna by Māori, will jointly become a legal person named Te Kahui Tupua. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has been at Aotearoa.
The mountain was claimed in 1865 as part of the confiscation of 1.2 million hectares of Māori land for the rebellion of the Taranaki Wars. In 1978 it was vested in the Taranaki Māori Trust Board, but immediately gifted back to the nation, although the Waitangi Tribunal found little evidence that Hapu had agreed to the deal. Today, representatives of the Crown, led by Treaty Minister Andrew Little, walked onto Aotearoa to the sound of the parihaka drum and poi to right that historic wrong. Lead negotiator for Ngā Iwi o Taranaki, Jamie Tuta, says it was a momentous occasion.
This has been 6 years in the making for our generation, but it's been 172 years for those of our tauheke, those of our tupuna that have passed. And so today is special because it marks the end of the negotiation process.
Jamie Tuta says restoring the mountain's name was a vital part of the settlement.
The name changes, or the restoration as we like to say, of Taranaki Maunga to the mountain, the major peak, is really special. And so it's a Te Reo Māori only name. It's the first time in New Zealand history that a natural geographic feature such as a mountain has a Te Reo Māori only name, and that will be Taranaki Maunga. So no more Egmont.
The National Park will also have a new name, Te Papakura o Taranaki, meaning the highly regarded and treasured lands of Taranaki, and a new governance structure. The park and its peaks will become a legal person named Te Kahui Tupua. It will have an entity to act as its voice, Te Tōpuni Kokorangi, made up of iwi and Crown appointees. Jamie Tuta says he's optimistic the wider community will embrace the new arrangement.
We as a country and a nation are mature enough to move beyond what we experienced in the 1970s and the 1980s. But in saying that, issues of co-governance, what's happening in Three Waters, do stir some of those elements of Aotearoa New Zealand that are probably not as supportive as they ought to be to arrangements like what we're doing today.
Another unique aspect of the settlement is that it was negotiated with the 8 iwi of Taranaki collectively. Negotiator Liana Potu says that was an interesting challenge.
We're really proud that we came together as a collective of 8 iwi, and actually we're at this point and we're still together. I think that says a lot about the iwi leadership around the Maunga.
Treaty Minister Andrew Little says people will still be able to access the park.
The Maunga will still be a national park under the National Parks Act, and everybody who wants access will have access. The Maunga, however, will, I think, be better cared for because not only will the Crown work in partnership with local iwi, but iwi Māori will exercise their kaitiakitanga obligations that they have to their tupuna.
The settlement, which also includes a $35 million financial redress, will now go out for ratification at 14 hui around Taranaki and New Zealand.
Now to another high-profile case in the US, the Hollywood star versus the retired optometrist. Today, a jury has declared Gwyneth Paltrow innocent over a skiing accident in Utah in 2016. Retired optician Terry Sanderson accused the actor of skiing into him, claiming it left him with brain injuries, broken ribs and a loss of enjoyment for life. Ms. Paltrow countersued, saying he ran into her on the slopes. Mr. Sanderson had been seeking $500,000 in damages. Ms. Paltrow sought $1 US plus legal fees. The BBC's Sophie Long is in Utah.
This was a he said, she said trial. We had a huge amount of evidence about his state of mind and his physical and mental health before and after that accident. But we now know that the jury found that Gwyneth Paltrow was not responsible. He was suing her for $300,000. She countersued for $1. She has now been awarded that $1 in damages, and he will also now be liable to pay the legal fees, which will likely run into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now, Gwyneth Paltrow left court immediately after the verdict. She didn't stop to speak to reporters. She walked past very serenely, very calmly, as she has been throughout the course of this trial. And then Terry Sanderson came out. He did stop to speak to reporters, and he said that Gwyneth Paltrow had spoken to him on her way out of court and simply said, "I wish you well." And he said to her, "Thank you." Now, this has sparked a huge social media circus, really. There's been a huge amount of activity on TikTok and Instagram, and also, you know, even late night shows in America have turned this case into comedy. People here, though, in Utah, in Park City, have seen this as a positive thing in some respects, in that it has raised awareness of safety on the mountains. Now, Ms. Paltrow said in her initial evidence that she hadn't been totally aware that if a collision takes place, that you are responsible for giving your details to the other person. Details must be exchanged before you leave the mountain. There is a very clear code of conduct, and the ski instructor I was speaking to today said that, in a way, it will have raised awareness of that, and if anything, the mountains will be a safer place because of this very high-profile trial.
Lottie, you getting in touch about rentals. This person says, of course, people are selling rentals. All the advantages of owning them, like interest deduction, have gone. So the government has done this, but done nothing to fill the gap.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Kia ora, I'm Marama Tipole. Donald Trump has become the first US president in history to be charged with a crime. He'll be indicted in New York next week over alleged hush money given to a porn star just before the 2016 presidential election. Mr. Trump's convicted former lawyer, Michael Cohen, who was involved in the payment and testified before this grand jury, has this response.
This is a long time coming. This has not been like what they did to me, what the Southern District did. They gave me 48 hours to plead guilty. They were filing an 80-page indictment against me and my wife. Right? Very, very different scenario here. This is 5 years to hold this man accountable. Now, I do have to acknowledge that during that time period, he still was president of the United States. To be honest with you, I had no idea that it was dropping today myself. I was surprised.
It's unclear what exact charges Mr. Trump faces, but CNN sources say there are more than 30 counts related to business fraud. Back home, the Chief Ombudsman has reopened his investigation into a complaint over former Minister Stuart Nash's emails. An email containing confidential cabinet information, which Mr. Nash sent to two of his donors, was subject to an official information request by a journalist in 2021. But the email was never released, as Mr. Nash claimed it was sent as an MP, not a minister. The Ombudsman dropped his original inquiry last May after a discussion with the complainant, who has now asked him to reopen it. Peter Bosher says his investigation will consider whether the information was held in his capacity as a minister, which is subject to the OIA, or as an MP, which is not. A Hawke's Bay business owner is worried he'll miss out on financial help with the Cyclone Business Recovery Fund massively oversubscribed. The funding for all affected areas is $50 million, but in Hawke's Bay, at least 1,600 applications have been made for more than $41 million of funding. Greg Miller from Valley Divine Restaurant in Esk Valley told Checkpoint that he's had no customers and is struggling.
Still paying all my staff. I've had a good few months leading into it, so I had a bit of a buffer. Still finding insurances. I haven't heard from my assessor for that, and I've also haven't heard back from the Chamber of Commerce who are dealing with the 40k grant from the government. Haven't seen the cent of that either, so I'm just running on my reserves.
Greg Miller says if funding isn't granted soon, he'll have to let his staff go. The negotiator of a treaty settlement with Taranaki iwi says they can now reconnect with their tupuna. The initialing ceremony with Ngā Iwi o Taranaki and the Crown was held this afternoon. It establishes Mount Taranaki and other peaks in the area as a legal person and has co-governance arrangement for the national park. Negotiator Liana Boltu says it's the culmination of the work over decades.
It's a privilege to be a part of that journey, but actually it's just bringing to fruition the dreams and aspirations of our tupuna that carried this kaupapa before us.
Gwyneth Paltrow says she's proud of how all 8 iwi came together for the settlement. The environment group Greenpeace has congratulated the National Party on its new renewable energy policy. The Electrify NZ plan aims to speed up the process for approving consents on renewable energy projects. Greenpeace New Zealand's Executive Director Russell Norman says the plan is a good step forward, but he urged National to abandon its oil exploration policy.
Greenpeace welcomes the National Party putting out this policy to decarbonise energy. It's obviously an essential step if we're going to avoid climate catastrophe. There remain some outstanding issues for National, such as its policy to increase oil and gas exploration, which is very much at odds, but it's still great.
Russell Norman says it's also vital for the National Party to have a robust policy for agricultural emissions. An appeal by Christchurch Adventure Park against a ruling that it was liable for damaging and destroying homes on the Port Hills in 2017 has been dismissed. Owners of homes destroyed in Christchurch's Port Hills fires won a $12 million plus lawsuit against the Christchurch Adventure Park in 2021 after its chairlift was found to have spread the blaze. The park's owner, Leisure Investments NZ, appealed the decision, which was dismissed today in the Court of Appeal, which also found there was no reason costs should not be awarded. It says the High Court was correct in finding Leisure Investments negligent and financially responsible. The Catholic bishops of Aotearoa, New Zealand, have warmly welcomed a Vatican move to finally reject a doctrine used to justify the invasion and colonisation of Indigenous lands by European powers. The doctrine of discovery has its basis in decrees issued by popes in the 1400s. It was used as the legal and political basis to seize land and convert people in Africa and the Americas. The Vatican now says the doctrine failed to recognise the inherent human rights of Indigenous peoples. An arrest has been made after a manhunt that saw a fielding school go into lockdown. Police say the man failed to stop for officers on March the 15th. He's been charged in relation to that incident, as well as with aggravated robbery and unlawful assembly for other matters. A warmer weekend is expected after a drop in temperatures this week. Met Service says a trough over the Tasman Sea will replace cold southerlies with warmer northerlies as it moves across the country. It says it's likely to move quickly. Met Service says more settled weather is then expected to return early next week. And in sport, Sri Lanka have made just 157, batting first against the Black Caps in the final ODI of their tour. They were all out in the 42nd over. But New Zealand is struggling too. A short time ago, they were 7 for 2. That's the news.
This week on Music 101. Kimbra joins me to talk new music, life and living in New York City. Best Alternative winner Vera Allen tells us why she moved back to Wellington from LA. And comedian Guy Montgomery makes us laugh and picks his favourite songs and talks life on the mixtape. Music 101, this Saturday with me, Charlotte Ryan, from 1 p.m. here on RNZ National.
RNZ National, funded through New Zealand On Air, Lisa Owen and Checkpoint. Back in a minute, but right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Northland through to Waikato, including Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Cloud gradually increasing today with isolated showers developing tomorrow morning. Rain spreading eastwards tomorrow afternoon with isolated thunderstorms possible. In Gisborne, fine today, cloudy periods for tomorrow with isolated showers. Waitomo to Wellington, including the central high country. Mainly fine today. Periods of rain for tomorrow, though, clearing for Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa by the evening. For Nelson and Bulla to Fiordland, cloud increasing today. Rain developing overnight, possibly heavy, turning to showers tomorrow morning. Some heavy, possibly thundery for Bulla and Westland from the afternoon. For Marlborough and Canterbury, fine with high cloud. However, a period of rain tomorrow morning. For Otago and Southland, fine today. A period of rain tomorrow morning, easing to a few showers, then becoming fine by evening. And for the Chatham Islands, cloudy periods and a few showers mainly for today. It's coming up to 8 minutes past 6.
Ngā mihi marama. No mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. An Auckland councillor is calling Fuller's out for its poor ferry service, saying it needs to pay staff more if it wants to plug crew gaps. Fuller's 360 runs Auckland's commuter ferries and is cancelling about 30% of its services each week due to ongoing staff problems, including a shortage of skippers. And it's talking to the government about loosening immigration settings to bring in more overseas workers. Mike Lee is one of two councillors on Auckland Transport's board. He says the ferry companies had a few tellings off.
Fullers have been given a number of warnings and have reacted to that in a kind of a very unhappy way. But we have to get past that. There's been all sorts of meetings, including meetings with the minister and a number of parties to try and solve the problem. And I believe the real problem with Fuller's, the business model seems to be very much totally focused on the bottom line, and that means there's a limit to how much they're going to pay people, and there is also a preference for smaller ships, which are probably more profitable than the bigger ferries that used to be on the harbour.
So Mike, hang on, let's be clear here. Are you saying they're pushing too hard for bigger profits at the expense of the service, not paying their staff what they should? Because they're saying they've got a lot of vacancies because of the immigration settings. Are you saying that's because of wages and conditions?
I believe so. Wasn't so long ago, 4 years ago, Fullers were running half-hour services. That just seems unreal that they could do that today on the Waiheke run, for instance, during the summer. I think they're putting pressure on the government about opening up immigration and all the rest of it, but I think in what they're looking for, I believe they are kind of locked into a certain salary budget, and they don't want to exceed it to attract people. That's what my view is.
Mike, you said that there has been warnings to Fullers. What are the nature of those and the consequences if they don't heed them?
There have been stern letters, I'm aware, coming from Auckland Transport, who is the main funder of Fullers on the contractor services. At Fullers, I just had a briefing today. Fullers are responding, so that's all I can tell you at this stage.
OK, let's move on to the budget. The council is short of a lot of money, according to the mayor, some $290 million. Are you going to support Wayne Brown's proposal for budget cuts? Will you vote for it?
My job as a councillor is to listen to the public, and I understand 28,000 submissions has come in, up from 11,000 last time, which is more the norm. And from what I can see of these submissions, people are very, very opposed to the way the budget has been constructed. In other words, people at the bottom end of the council feeding chain, if you like, the services to local boards, services to libraries, citizens' advice bureaus, grants and so on, they've been cut back savagely. But the interesting thing is that the core part of the budget, and we're talking about $6 billion here, has been kept away from the councillors for some 5 months now. We've only recently gained access to the granular data, and we're exploring options of making cuts at the big end of town, and the fat end of the budget, which has been jealously guarded by the council senior management. There is plenty of fat there, and plenty of options without cutting services that local boards, libraries, citizens' advice bureaus, and so on provide to the public. That's as far as I'm prepared to. That's as much as I'm prepared to say right now, Lisa. But
hang on, Mike. Bottom line.
Believe me, the budget as construed is not the only option. There are better ways to balance the budget than than the council is looking at right now, in my personal view.
OK, so Mike, bottom line, you won't vote for it how it stands?
The budget as it stands now need not be the only way for Auckland to have a balanced budget for this council.
Did you tell a community meeting on Waiheke Island that you were not going to vote for the budget as it stands?
Exactly, yes.
So you're not going to vote for it as it stands?
Not as it stands right now, but, let's have a look at all the submissions or the thrust of the submissions, and we'll make a final decision at that stage. But as you know, there are certain things that I'm clearly opposed to, cuts to local services and also selling Auckland International Airport shares. I'm totally opposed to that.
Hey, do you agree with Wayne Brown on much?
Yes, I think Wayne Brown, to be fair, has come in representing people who are really ticked off and frustrated with the Super City. So I know he's particularly concerned about the impacts on rates increases. Other people want to solve the problem, putting rates up further and borrowing more, and I don't believe that's feasible either. I do believe there is plenty of fat in the system. The big end of the council, the big end of town, if you like, the Proud Tower, 135 Albert Street, we can certainly make economies in the spending in that part of the council and restore or maintain the services we give to the community.
And that's Auckland Councillor Mike Lee. Meanwhile, frustrated commuters on Auckland's North Shore say 6 years is a long time to wait for construction to start on a second harbour crossing. The government's put forward 5 options, including an additional bridge or light rail tunnel across the Waitemata Harbour, along with walking and cycling pathways. But experts say now is the time to open the bridge to cyclists and pedestrians. Our reporter Lucy Sear has more.
North Shore resident Erin spends over an hour in her car each morning, driving from Long Bay, and says a second crossing can't come soon enough.
We're excited for another crossing because my kids go to Mount Albert Grammar and the traffic in the morning is terrible. Like, we have to leave an hour and a half beforehand in order to get to the kids in school on time.
Erin says she would travel on light rail, which is part of all 5 options. This commuter who lives in Birkdale wants to go to work by foot.
I'd love to be able to run to work from the shore in the mornings. That would be great.
And this West Auckland resident would bike to the North Shore if the option was there.
Even if I don't live there, it's good to have more options to cross the bridge. I use bike a lot.
University students Holly and Colleen, who both live on the North Shore, say they're glad that plans to connect the North Shore to the rest of the rail network are finally on the table. But in the meantime, they want the government to continue discounted bus fares to keep travel options viable for North Shore residents.
More bus options, yeah, a bit cheaper. Like, I think
keep the half
fees. Keep the half fees, yeah. I personally won't take the bus if they go back to full fees.
With the construction of the harbour crossing still 6 years away, some advocates are calling for more immediate actions to reduce congestion. Transportation expert Dr Tim Welsh from the University of Auckland says with the drastic emissions reduction targets by 2030, starting in 2029 doesn't give enough time. He says more cost-effective changes are urgently needed.
Congestion charge for people coming into the city, which would reduce the amount of traffic coming in and over the bridge, prioritizing public transport that already runs across the bridge, so bus lanes across the bridge instead of car lanes, and even allowing cyclists and pedestrians to cross the bridge.
Fiane DeLeafy from Bike Auckland say they welcome the light rail crossing proposals, but also want the government to put cycling and walking lanes on the existing harbour bridge now.
It's a whole decade or more away. We need access now for climate-friendly modes of transport, and we know that 66% of Aucklanders want to walk and cycle across the Waitemata.
Public consultation is currently open, with the final decision set to be made in June.
It's 17 minutes after 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A witch hunt and political persecution. That's the reaction from former US President Donald Trump after revelations a grand jury in New York voted to indict him following an investigation into hush money paid to porn star Stormy Daniels. The implications could reshape next year's presidential race, with Donald Trump accusing the Manhattan District Attorney of doing a political favour for current President Joe Biden. A short time ago, I spoke with CNN's national correspondent Gloria Pazmino and asked her about the nature of the charges.
We know that former President Donald Trump is facing more than 30 counts related to business fraud in that indictment here in Manhattan. That grand jury voting earlier today to indict the former president. All of this as a result of a long-standing investigation that the Manhattan District Attorney has been leading into Trump's alleged role in a pay scheme involving adult film star Stormy Daniels. All of this leading up to the 2016 presidential campaign. Now, we should be clear that that indictment so far is sealed in the court documents. We have not had a chance to look at it yet, but we do expect the charges to be formally announced in the coming days, but our reporting indicating that Trump is facing up to 30 charges related to business fraud. We also heard from sources close to Trump that the former president is, in fact, expected to appear in court next week on Tuesday.
Can you put this in context for us, please? How serious is this for a former president to face charges?
Well, look, it is certainly unprecedented, right? This is the first time in American history that we are seeing a current or a former president face criminal charges. We have never been here before as a country. But this is not the only investigation that Trump is facing. There are several outstanding legal investigations in other areas of the country, in Washington, D.C., related to January 6th, in Georgia, related to voting interference. So whether this is the most significant of the investigations or not is going to be up to the public to decide. But it is without question that we are in uncharted waters as it pertains to seeing a former president facing a criminal indictment. A jury, a grand jury of American citizens clearly decided and voted today, agreeing they believe there's enough evidence to charge the former president with a crime. That is what a grand jury does.
So he appears in court like someone else who's been charged, but what do we know about the process? Did the police go and arrest him? Does he get his fingerprints taken? Is there a mug shot? What happens?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you might remember last week that we were all anticipating the possibility of this indictment and this arrest because it was Trump who took to social media to say that he was expecting to be arrested, and he also called on his supporters to come out and protest. Now, I've been in the area of Lower Manhattan where the criminal court is located here in New York City for the past several days, and things here have been very much under control. There are a few protesters that have been in and out of the surrounding area, but things here for the most part have remained calm and under control. Now, we do have reporting this evening that the New York Police Department here in the city is gearing up to make sure that things here are safe. There is a very large media presence here in the area. And, as I said before, the president has encouraged his supporters to protest. Whether that happens or not remains to be seen. But we do know that local law enforcement officials here in the city, as well as the Secret Service and federal agencies, are all working together to make sure that if people do come out and demonstrate in any way, that it's done so in an organized way and that it is done safely. The bigger challenge, perhaps, here in all of this is not just making sure that protests go smoothly, but should the president appear in person here next week to face a judge in relation to that indictment, that does create serious logistical and safety challenges. Is the former president, Secret Service is going to be involved, and it just creates significant challenges here in the area to ensure that it's all safe and that it can be done safely for Trump, but also everyone else that is involved here.
And that's CNN national correspondent Gloria Pasmano. Now, she was speaking from New York, and apologies for the dodgy phone line there. An American journalist in Russia has been arrested and accused of spying. Evan Gershkovich is 31 and works for the Wall Street Journal. He's an expert on Russia and was working in the city of Yekaterinburg, where he was detained. The White House has condemned his detention, and the Wall Street Journal strongly denies the allegation against him. The BBC's Steve Rosenberg is in Moscow with this report.
As he was led from the courthouse, a fleeting glimpse of Evan Gershkovich, the American journalist, arrested in Russia and accused of spying for America. He faces up to 20 years in prison. Evan Gershkovich, now with the Wall Street Journal, is an experienced Russia reporter. He was detained 1,000 miles from Moscow in Yekaterinburg. Russia's security service claimed he'd been collecting secrets about a defense factory.
Using the cover of being a journalist, with a journalist visa and accreditation, this person carried out completely different activities. What he was doing in Yekaterinburg was not journalism.
The Wall Street Journal said it vehemently denies the allegations. It called Evan Gershkovich a trusted, dedicated reporter. The reaction from the White House:
"This espionage charges are ridiculous. The targeting of American citizens by Russian government is unacceptable. We condemn the detention of Mr. Gershkovich in the strongest terms."
The reporter was brought to Moscow, to this court, but his lawyer wasn't allowed to see him. That's the kind of system of justice we have here, the lawyer Daniel Berman says. They didn't let me in.
Well, this is the first time I can remember since the Cold War that a Western reporter has been arrested for espionage in Russia. And that shows not only the level of tension right now between Russia and the West, it shows a determination on the part of Moscow to silence all criticism.
Russian journalists have long been under pressure. Mikhail Afanasyev went on trial this week. He'd written about Russian riot police refusing to fight in Ukraine. And last month, Maria Ponomarenko was jailed for 6 years for posting about Russian attacks on the city of Mariupol. Now an American reporter is in custody. His case declared top secret. His chances of securing freedom, not great. In Russian courts, more than 99% of verdicts are guilty.
And finally tonight, the keys to a long life. A Colorado woman has just celebrated her birthday, and at the age of 104, Lucille Claridge may not walk so easily, but when her fingers are at the piano, you can hear a lifetime of beautiful music. Reporter Danny New paid her a visit.
Oh, thank you.
So, what do you give somebody for their 104th birthday?
Oh, look at that.
Chocolate works, but after a century and change, I think what's most generous is the gift that Lucille Claridge keeps giving us. How sweet the sound. Lucille may not be in the same health condition that she always was, and due to balance issues, she can't really walk anymore. But when she sits down at the piano, nearly 100 years of music comes back to her fingertips.
Kids just always did what their folks told them to do. And
what?
It was different then.
Lucille has been playing piano since the roaring 20s, when her mother strongly encouraged her to start taking lessons.
This one is my mother when she was 21 years old.
And in turn, she did the same with her daughter, Billy.
Music it's in her soul. You know, it's just in her, and I've heard it my whole life.
And when her late husband, Wally, passed away in 1996...
He's the greatest dad any kid ever had, huh?
That's right.
Lucille made sure to keep playing every week at their church in Littleton, where, up until the pandemic, Lucille played the organ for 42 years.
But how happy do you feel when you start playing piano again? How happy does it make you?
Oh, well, I'm glad glad that my fingers work.
She's right. Lucille has a lot to be grateful for. And as you saw earlier,
happy birthday to you.
People have been bringing her presents all week long for the big 104. And keep in mind, at her 100th birthday party, 600 people showed up. And she's still making new friends.
I miss my grandma, so I'm hugging you. Thank you for hugging me. She's very young. She's 91.
Oh, just a child.
And while there are plenty of friends and family that she misses now,
this is our house.
When she sits at the piano, she remembers what mattered most to them.
My mother had me take piano lessons. And I didn't always like to practice, but...
You glad you did?
I'm glad I did, and I'm glad she had me take lessons.
That is remarkable, 104 years old and so dexterous, still able to crank out a couple of, bangers on the piano. Good on her. Now, just a reminder that it's daylight savings this weekend. It'll get so confusing for people like me. Don't forget to move your clocks back 1 hour this Sunday at 2 a.m. So it's going to be lighter when you get up in the morning for a run, or you can just spend an extra hour in bed, whichever you like. If you live in Auckland and are out and about this weekend, a reminder that Muriwai Beach remains closed to visitors and can be accessed by residents only. There are landslips throughout the town following Cyclone Gabrielle, and a third of the town's residents have been displaced. Now, there are still roads that have not been cleared, and the community is asking visitors to be patient and stay away. Piha and Karikari beaches are also closed. Now, that is all from us. Late News team's going to keep you updated throughout the evening, and don't forget, if you missed anything from Checkpoint, you can check us out on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get podcasts from. Have a wonderful weekend.
RNZ News at 6:30. Donald Trump is expected to be arraigned in New York next week after becoming the first US president to face criminal charges. Chief Ombudsman Peter Bosher has reopened his investigation into a complaint over former Minister Stuart Nash's emails. An industry body has found most water service providers aren't checking whether fire hydrants are working for firefighters despite agreeing to do so. And the man known as the QAnon shaman, who was jailed for 41 months for his role in the 2021 riot at the US Capitol, is to be released early. Images of Jacob Chansley wearing face paint and a horned headdress went around the world. We'll have more news at 7.
This week on Country Life, two sisters turn the shearers' quarters on the family farm near Tianau into an entrepreneurial hub. Anna sells food to hungry travellers.
Here on the front bench you can see all the freshly baked treats that I make daily.
While Kate turns the wool her parents grow into high-end knitwear.
So we're using our ewe wool, which is 36 micron, and for the children's range we're using our lamb's wool, which is about 30 micron.
For this and other rural stories, tune in to Country Life. Friday night and Saturday morning after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
29 minutes to 7. It's time for Trending Now on this Friday